You want to have a deeper understanding about the political reality of today, it's China. You have to understand what happened in 1989, because that's a turning point of contemporary history of China.
Coming up on British thought leaders, Wang Dan, one of the student leaders of the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests.
When Deng Xiaoping see the picture of Tiananmen Square, millions of people gathering together on the square to protest, he thinks they made a mistake. They make people no longer too afraid of government. So they have to use violence again to try to restore this political fear.
Dan says the West needs to understand that the Chinese Communist Party won't stop being a violent regime.
Even today, if we view the reality of China, we have to remember every time when there's a crisis happened, CCP will turn to violence.
Welcome to British Thought Leaders. I'm Lee Hall. Today I'm sitting down with Wang Dan, one of the student leaders of the June 4th, 1989 Tiananmen Square protests. Dan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
For our viewers who may not understand so much about what happened on June 4th, 1989, could you talk us through it?
Well, basically, I was a student at that time, and I participated in the democratic movement and become one of the most wanted list. After that, I was put in jail for 6.5 years. Then I exiled to the United States. So that's basically my story. There's a lot of things happened, but it's pretty simple as this.
So what happened on the day itself? There was a protest by students on Tiananmen Square, and the soldiers basically shot them down.
That's on 35 years ago, June 3rd, late 19 June 3rd.
Right.
But I was not in Tiananmen Square. I was in the dormitory of my college, Peking University. But that night, I got a lot of phone call, and many of my classmates come back from Tiananmen Square and Chang'an Boulevard. They told me the massacre happened and the people died. So but I tried to go back to Tiananmen Square, but the road already blocked by the military, by the troops. So I didn't witness the massacre by myself. But of course, there's a lot of hearsay. I heard a lot of stories.
What were the figures that people thought, like how many people were killed on that night?
Well, I would like to say we don't have very accurate numbers, because that might be secret. I mean, maybe the Chinese government know more than us. But my personal guess is, I think that at least 2,000 people died, and thousands of people injured.
When you were getting ready for the protests, did you have any idea how dangerous it was going to be?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because of course I know there will be dangerous, but I don't know what's the degree of the danger. During the movement, when I realized already noticed by the government and they are watching me, at that time I guess after the movement maybe I will expelled from university or the wars, maybe I will go to. I even didn't think I'm going to go to jail. I just think I will be expelled from the school. I lost the opportunity to continue my study. Yeah. But I never expected there's a massacre and the troops will shoot at us.
How much of a changing point in Chinese history was June the 4th? What changes did we see afterwards?
Well, there are a lot of historical lessons I think we should learn after 35 years. One is, I think, a lot of Chinese people and Western people, they hope or they expect if there's an open-minded leader, or we call the reformist, maybe CCP can do some good things. But the lessons from what happened in 1989 told us that's impossible, because that year we have Zhao Ziyang, the former general secretary. His general secretary, his top one, the number one leader of CCP, he wanted democracy, but finally, eventually, he forced to step down. That means the very basic nature of CCP is anti-democracy. Even their own leader, like Zhao Ziyang or Hu Yaobang, if they want democracy, they have to step down. So that that message is very clear. You cannot expect that some so-called reformist push that party to do political reform by themselves. I think that at least that's one idea. I changed my mind. Because when I was young, I have a lot of hope for the CCP's leader. If we have a better leader, maybe we'll have a better future. But now I give up this hope, and I also hope the whole world give up these expectations. That's a lesson from 1989. The second lesson I think is very important is the basic method for CCP to keep their control is using violence. Right. You know, in 1980s, we used to call it a golden age. That's an openness period. That's a reform period. It looks like everything become better. But when CCP face a crisis, when they feel threatened by something, they naturally turn to violence. They use troops, they use military to try to resolve the social problem. And I think that's another phase, another nature of CCP. This party, they got their power by force, by violence. They keep their control by violence. So violence is a very important factor. If we view even today, if we view the reality of China, we have to remember every time when there's a crisis happened, CCP will turn to violence. But it makes me feel disappointed that some leaders in Western countries, they still have some hope. They want to have a peaceful compete with the CCP. I think it's also impossible. This is a violent party.
So the image of the tank and the man standing in front of the tank is iconic. Everyone in the world knows about it. But do people in China know what happened on June the 4th?
Well, it depends on age. Right. I think the Chinese people beyond like 40 years old, almost everybody, they know what happened in 1989. Because, for example, me myself is 55 years old. I was 20 years old at that time. So my age and the people older than me, they all remember, at least they know what happened. But the young generation, they know almost nothing. Right. Because after 1989, the government tried everything they can do to block the truth, to cover the truth. So young people really, they may know something happened, but they don't know what kind of thing and what the consequences.
What was the Chinese Communist Party hoping to achieve through this massacre, and were they not concerned how the world would react?
Well, I think during the 1980, during that 10 years reform, Chinese people, especially young generation like us, we started to get information from Western countries, like democracy, human rights. We started to learn these ideas. And during that 10 years, we also lost our political fear. We were not afraid of our government very much during that 10 years. I think that frightened the leaders like Deng Xiaoping, because one secret of CCP to keep it control is to make ordinary people have political fear, afraid of the government. So I believe when Deng Xiaoping saw the picture of Tiananmen Square, millions of people gathering together on the square to protest, he think they made a mistake. They make people no longer too afraid of government. So they have to use violence again to try to restore this political fear. Right. And you can see after the Tiananmen Massacre until today, 35 years passed, there's still now the second June 89 democracy movement happened, because the people, they know if they go to the street, they were crushed by the tank. That's the purpose of the Chinese government, why they send the troop. They just want to restore political fear.
What were their thoughts about how the world would react? Because something like the BBC were there and filming things. Did the CCP not worry about that?
One thing is the top leader, Deng Xiaoping, I think he knows the consequences. He knows there will be sanctions from Western countries. But I think the whole world must remember that economy is not the top priority of CCP. Yeah. They care their power more than economy. So even though he can expect that there's an economic sanction, he doesn't care. What he cares is if he can keep his power. That's more important than economy. So reaction from Western country, if they're only in the area of economy, that's no harm for the CCP. And on the other hand, I think Deng Xiaoping, well, you can call he's kind of smart. He knows that with time goes by, the people will forget what happened. Right. Yeah. So that's exactly what happened. So just after 2 or 3 years after Tiananmen Massacre, the whole world forget what happened. They start again to cooperate with Chinese government, invest in China. That's all in Deng Xiaoping's expectation and calculate.
It's hard to imagine British soldiers slaughtering the British people in the way that the Chinese soldiers did. I wanted to try and understand how the regime got them into this mindset where they would do something so brutal. I mean, how would you get a soldier to do that? It was almost inhuman.
As my knowledge, those soldiers, before they sent to Tiananmen Square, for at least 1 month, they are isolated in some camp, and they're brainwashed by the government. They cannot read newspapers. They cannot listen to radios. They can just listen to the lecture by their commanders. And the commander told them that some very bad person try to overthrow the government, and we have to defend the government. This is an honorable job. So we must do that because we are soldiers. So they're already brainwashed. So when they shoot at us, in their mind, they think this is the enemy. They already did a lot of bad things. They think we deserve that, maybe. So I think brainwash have a huge influence for those soldiers.
So it's 35 years since this happened. You have your T-shirt with the logo for this year.
Yeah, this one.
So I mean, the important thing is that every year we revisit this and we remember what happened to kind of keep the memory alive of what this regime is like.
Well, I think the memory of what happened in 1989 is not only for the history. The most important meaning is for reality, for today's politics. First, if you want to understand, if you want to have a deeper understanding about the political reality of today, China, you have to understand what happened in 1989, because that's a turning point of contemporary history of China. I mean, the history before 1989 is totally different from the history after 1989. That's very important, the turning point. After 1989, the whole China changed, and the CCP's mindset changed, and the method of them to keep their power also changed. Everything changed after 1989. So if you don't understand what happened in 1989, you cannot have a better understanding of today. That's one. Secondly, we have some very important lessons, as I told just now. if you don't learn those lessons, I think you will make wrong policy or wrong decision regarding China policy. So remember what happened at our revise or try to get some lessons from 1989. It's very important for today's China policy. I mean, for those Western government even, or Western peoples.
What would you say to young people in China today who may want to bring about change? What advice would you give them?
Well, young generation, I actually still have hope for them. I mean, young generation is always the driving force for the change of history, if you learn from the past, the history of human being. So by this way, I still have hope for them. But it still needs time. I mean, the CCP can gain the belief from young generation because there are still economic growth. So the young generation think they can still make money, they can play game, they can survive. So there's no reason for them to stand up or go to Tiananmen Square to protest. This all just because they still have economic growth, even though it already become very low. But we all know the Chinese economy will just go down like this way. So it's not very difficult to expect in the future, not very long, maybe in 10 years, when the economic situation become worse and worse, that will make young generation awake. Just like what happened in 2022 when white paper revolution happened. When government do something harm the interest of personal interest of young generation, they still will stand up. That happened in 2022, and that will happen in the future.
For people in the West who want to understand this regime that rules China, what do you think are the key things that people don't quite understand that they should know?
Well, for example, for me, I really can understand some of Western leaders. They advocate for peaceful compete with China. They said we have to make us stronger than China, and then we can beat CCP. I think it's somehow ridiculous because what's the competition? If you want to have a fair competition, there's a precondition that both sides have to obey the same rule. You have to follow by the rule. But we all know Chinese government and the CCP, they never follow the rule. So what's the meaning of the competition if they never follow the rule? So this is obviously is a clear a war. I don't mean a military war. Maybe it's a cultural war or ideological war. It's already like a Cold War happened. But many leaders of Western countries, I think they still stay in the old stage. They think that they still have space to cooperate with the CCP. Or for me, I think it's already impossible because Xi Jinping has their own ambition. He not only want to keep his control inside China. The big problem is he wants to expand China's influence, CCP's influence, expand this influence to the whole world.
Right, well, he Belt and Road and all.
Yeah, he wants to export the ideology. Right. That makes him quite different from other leaders like Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao. I hope the Western people and Western political leaders understand this. This is a different China, quite different from the China in the economic reforms period.
So should people in the West be concerned about that?
Of course. For example, I come from the United States, and for example, I graduated from Harvard. You know, nowadays in Harvard, if the student want to study China, if they want to write a paper about China, they are allowed by professor to do not use their real name. because the professors have a good intention. They worried if they use their real name and they do fair study, they go to China, they will have some problem. Well, this thing make me worry a lot because it's already harmed and almost destroyed the freedom of Western countries. The very value. If you write a letter, you cannot use your real name at the elite university. Where's the freedom? So this one example to already show us that the CCP's influence already here. I believe there's the same story happened at Oxford or Cambridge. So it's already everywhere in the West countries. In West countries, we have a lot of threats. For another example is some distance in United States and in France. I just hear the news. They threatened by the CCP's agent on the soil of Western countries. They almost kidnapped by the agent of CCP, send them back to China. So they already did a lot of things here in UK, in France, in United States. So, but not many Western people are aware of this. I think this is very dangerous.
So what can the West do?
Well, first, I think they have to change their mindset. You cannot see China as a fair competitor. And you have to try to touch the topic like regime change. For the past 30 years, Western people, they only want to engage with China. Now they said they want to do de-risk, decoupling. But a few people dare to mention regime change. I think that's ridiculous, because if there's no regime change happened in China, there's no space for de-risk or decoupling. It's meaningless for de-risk or decoupling. If there's still CCP control the China, the danger is still there, even though you're decoupling or de-risk with China. So regime change is very important. I hope the Western countries should have this kind of preparation for, you could say it's a new Cold War, or at least you have to prepare or try to push China, have a regime change, have a democratic regime instead of this regime. That's important for, not only for the benefit of Chinese people, but also for the benefit of Western people.
What are your hopes for the future of China? What changes do you want to see?
I put my hope on Chinese people. I know it's important for China to have help from outside world, but the very basic force to make change happen still on the shoulder of Chinese people. So I hope finally, sooner or later, Chinese people can awake and they can bravely stand up like what we did in 1989 to protest. So if people can stand up, that will make CCP leadership split. And that's the hope for the future. If the CCP is split, maybe some leader inside that, then maybe they choose other way, like what happened also in 1989 in former Soviet Union or other European countries. So that's my hope. I mean, but the very basic and the first step will be the protest of the Chinese people. They have to awaken.
Wang Dan, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.